Thank you, dog is out. So are we starting the live stream now, Sonia?
Yes, Chairman. Ready to start when you're ready.
Right, thank you. Welcome to Rochford District Council's remote audit committee meeting, and welcome to anyone watching this via the live stream. Agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies from George Ianu and Michael Hoy. Item 2, substitute members. I understand Councillor Wilson is substituting for Councillor Hoy. 3, non-members attending. There are none. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July. Are the minutes agreed, members?
Agreed.
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 We're all agreed. Agenda item 5, to receive declarations of interest. Members, are there any declarations of interest? None. Agenda item 6, financial statements for 2019-20. Naomi Lucas, I believe the Assistant Director Resources, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report summarises the preliminary audit conclusion for Rochford District Council's financial statements for the year 1920. I will hand over to Debbie Hanson, who is the audit partner who's with us tonight, to go through the substance of her report and her findings in just a moment. But I'd just like to remind members that the draft accounts were published on the council's website before the statutory deadline on the 25th of June 2020, and they have been available for the public to view since that time. The auditors have now completed the majority of their work, and they're able to give the preliminary audit conclusion for those accounts. However, there are still a couple of matters that require final resolution and conclusion on their side before the actual final accounts can be signed off by the chair of the Audit Committee. So for that reason, we are asking for delegation for that final sign-off to happen after the meeting, once those final matters have been concluded, on the assumption that there will not be any material changes between now and then. If for whatever reason, which is highly unlikely, there were any material changes, we could bring another report back to Audit Committee formally. But because we're working to the assumption that there's only minor changes to the audit results report that will be required, yeah, we will consider the substance of the accounts and the auditor's report tonight, and then ask for that final delegation to be given to the chair of the Audit Committee to sign off once they're ready. Members will also be aware that as a result of the COVID situation this year, the normal audit deadlines have been extended slightly. So the final deadline when the accounts are meant to be signed off and published is the end of November. So we're confident that those that will be completed by that deadline, and we're hopeful that that will all be completed by the probably the end of October. So I don't think there's anything more I need to say at this time, but hopefully members have had an opportunity to review both the accounts themselves and the audit report that you've got presented to you tonight. So at that point, I will hand over to Debbie to take you through that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could refer the members therefore to the report in the pack. So our audit results report starts on page 6.5, which is actually just the cover sheet. And then on the next page, we've got a letter which just sets out the status of the audit. I think before getting into the detail of the report, I just wanted to highlight that I think this has been a very successful audit this year. I think if members of the committee will remember when we presented the audit results report for last year, we noted that there had been an improvement in the quality of the accounts and supporting working papers last year and a reduced number of differences identified. I think this year that positive direction of travel has continued. We've only actually reported one audit difference in our audit results report, which is a very small difference, which I will highlight to you in more detail. So I really just wanted to take the opportunity to say that particularly in the difficult circumstances that we've all been facing since March, I think the process for the production of the accounts and the process to support our audit has been excellent. And so thank you very much to the finance team for all their support through that. As Naomi has said, we have substantially completed the audit. I will take you through the areas that have still got to be complete, which are very much administrative in nature. And I'll just explain a little bit more detail what they are and therefore why we're not in a position to actually sign off the accounts at this date. So if I can take the members to the executive summary, which starts on page 6.9 of your numbering. Wanted to highlight here to you some of the changes that we've had to make to our audit strategy following the issue of our audit plan back in July. The main changes, as you would expect, have been as a result of COVID-19. Naomi's already highlighted the changes to the reporting timetable, so I won't recap on that. But then we've also considered where COVID-19 could have an impact on the financial statements. That's primarily in relation to balance sheet items and also disclosures within the accounts. And we've highlighted there two of the initial ones that we identified, which was the potential to the council to revisit the way it calculates the bad debt provision because of the possible greater default of people on debts as a result, again, of the impact on the economy from COVID-19. We've also flagged the need for enhanced disclosures on going concern. There is a presumption that local authority accounts are always prepared on a going concern basis because there is a presumption of continuation of service. So even if services were not provided by Roxburgh District Council, were provided by another entity, and basically a council would only be dissolved by an act of Parliament. Having said that, clearly the financial uncertainty going forwards has an impact on the council, and therefore we thought it was important that the council enhance that disclosure to make it clear what impact COVID-19 was having on its income and expenditure projections, uncertainties about future funding. I think it's also important to note that that assessment needs to look forward, which is an unusual part of the accounts. The rest of the accounts are very backward looking, but the going concern assessment needs to consider the council's financial position 12 months from the date of the audit report. So that's not from the balance sheet date, but it's from the date we actually issue our opinion and when you approve the accounts. In addition to that, we undertake work looking at the cash flow projections of the council over that period. And I'm pleased to note that basically following the council's enhancement of its disclosures and provision of the information to us, we're satisfied that it remains appropriate for the accounts to be prepared on a going concern basis, and we're satisfied regarding the disclosures made in the accounts. I will come on to a little bit regarding that and our internal consultation processes in a moment. Another area that we identified was valuation of land and buildings, which are included in the property, plant and equipment balances in the council's balance sheet. Again, an area that was impacted by COVID-19. As a result of the uncertainty in the market, RICS, who were the body that sets the standards for property valuations, issued guidance to valuers highlighting the impact of COVID-19 on markets and noting that that may result in valuers concluding that the material uncertainty regarding that volatility and the impact on their valuations. All the valuers that we've been working with as part of our audit have included a clause regarding that material uncertainty in their valuation reports, and the council has appropriately disclosed that in its note on estimation uncertainty. We've undertaken additional audit procedures to make sure that we're satisfied, as the council, that the values in the accounts are materially and reasonably stated on an estimation basis, and therefore we're satisfied that there's no impact on our opinion and the council has disclosed that uncertainty appropriately. We also noted the need to consider events after the balance sheet date. Clearly COVID-19 itself and the lockdown were pre the 31st of March and are therefore not post-balance sheet events. However, we did note that both the council and ourselves needed to remain alert to the risk that further events could occur after the balance sheet, relating COVID-19, for example, key suppliers going into liquidation could be an example for some authorities, and that the council may then need to consider disclosure. I don't think there's been any significant events that have impacted on Rochford that required disclosure, but clearly that's something that's been kept under review. We also noted that in our plan, we referred to IFRS 16, which is a leases standard, needing to be disclosed in the accounts in terms of the potential future impact. Again, as a result of COVID-19, the decision was made by SIPFA and MHLG to defer that application of that standard for a further year. So therefore, there was no additional work required in relation to that for this year. The final few areas that we need to note on are changes in materiality. So we always update our plan of materiality once we get the draft financial statements. This year, we also considered whether the materiality levels we'd set remained appropriate in light of COVID-19. And that was really to consider whether there was any change in the control environment, any sort of broader increase of risk across the board. We were satisfied that the levels we previously set remained appropriate at 2% of gross expenditure, and our performance materiality of 75%, which is the level we use to actually undertake our testing to provide sufficient headroom to make sure we don't miss any sort of material error. Another sort of quite practical area impacted by COVID-19 is what we call information provided by the entity. So when we are undertaking our audit procedures, one of the things we have to do in relation to anything that the council provides us as part of the evidence of the audit is consider the completeness, accuracy and appropriateness of that information. So in a sense, we're saying, is that if the council's providing us, for example, an arrears report, is that really an arrears report as at the date we want it? Does it include all the information, and is the information included within it correct? There's a number of procedures we perform around that. One of them is quite often sitting with officers as they run reports so we can see the parameters being input and make sure that the report is actually what we expect to see. I think it's been very helpful that we've been able to use the Microsoft Teams to actually share screens with the finance team. And so that's actually helped us in terms of addressing that risk around the IPE. And then finally, this is really probably the key area that means we're not in a position to be completing the audit today, but we should be hopefully very shortly, is that EY, along with all other audit firms, put in place, first of all, a moratorium around signing opinions due to COVID-19. And then when that was lifted in mid-April, it became clear that the uncertainties and impact of COVID-19 still present a risk for both the accounts and the audit report. And therefore, we put in place rigorous consultation processes for all audit reports that are issued to make sure that we're providing appropriate assurance to the reader of the accounts, that the disclosures in the council's accounts are appropriate, and that our audit report is also appropriate. We are hoping to go through that sort of consultation process fairly quickly. But obviously we have not yet gone through that, and so we're not in a position to issue the audit report. The areas that we're consulting on or considering consulting on are highlighted on the next page. So that's the uncertainty referred to by the valuers in relation to land and buildings valuations, and also the disclosures around going concern. We have noted in this report that one area we will be considering as part of that is whether it's appropriate for us to include an emphasis of matter in our audit report to draw attention to those two areas disclosure within the council's accounts. Until we complete the consultation, we won't know whether that's required or not. At the moment, I'm thinking it's unlikely based on the work that we've undertaken, but we need to confirm that our professional practice team is satisfied that that's an appropriate conclusion. Want to make it clear that an emphasis of matter is not any sort of modification or qualification of the audit report. It merely draws a reader's attention to something that we think is an important disclosure in the council's financial statements to help the reader understand the financial statements fully. So at the bottom of that page, just above the audit differences, we've noted that really the only areas to complete are that internal consultation process, my final review of all of the audit work, and then obviously the receipt of the signed accounts, letter of representation and statement of responsibility. So all of the work of substance has been completed, which I think is a really positive position to be in. If I then just refer you to the audit differences at the bottom of that page, as I said, the financial statements were very well prepared with very few issues identified. We've only got one unadjusted difference that we identified of £130,000, which impacts on both income and expenditure and overstates both of those figures, therefore has no impact on net expenditure or the general fund balance. It relates purely to recharges between different departments of the council in relation to housing benefit, I think. And I'm sure Carrie will correct me if members have any questions on that, but it's a very small difference that we've identified that management chose not to adjust. But we do ask that confirmation that the council is happy for that not to be adjusted to be included in the letter of representation, which is signed when we issue the audit report. The next page, which is page 6.12, just highlights the risks that we've identified in our audit plan and then highlights our findings and conclusions. I think they probably speak for themselves. The only things really to draw to your attention is, first of all, in relation to the pension liability valuation. Members may recall that we referred to something called the McLeod judgment last year, which impacted on accounts as a post-balance sheet event. There's now a further consultation regarding the McLeod judgment, which again is a post-balance sheet event. We're satisfied that the impact of that is not material to Rochford, but the council has included disclosure in its accounts regarding that position. I think I've already covered all of the other ones, so I wasn't going to go through those in any further detail. So I think what is the final page of our executive summary on 6.13, we just note that we have not identified any controlled differences as part of our work that we need to draw to your attention. And we've also completed our value for money conclusion work. We did identify one significant risk in our audit plan, which was around the council's asset delivery programme. We finished our assessment of the council's arrangements to deliver that. We've looked as part of that at the business cases, the work with specialists, council is engaged to support them in that, and the development of the strategy and business case, and we're satisfied that those arrangements are adequate, and therefore we're proposing to issue an unqualified value for money conclusion alongside our unqualified opinion on the financial statements. I don't think there's anything else I was going to draw to members' attention. The rest of the report just goes through the risks in more detail, the actual audit procedures that we undertook to address those risks and our conclusions. It also includes an example of our audit report or a potential audit report. The example that we've included does include the emphasis of matter, just so that members can see what that would look like. As I said, I don't yet know whether that will be included in the final version of the audit report or not. We then have a section that explains the audit difference in a little bit more detail and the work we did around value for money, again in further detail. And at the end, we have a section on our independence, which also highlights the audit fee and the proposed audit fee in relation to the audit. As I said, I think hopefully that gives members an overview of the key issues. As I said, I think a very positive result for the council and definitely continues the direction of travel we reported last year with very few issues identified from the audit. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report. I should also say actually that Chloe Weaver is also on the call, who's the audit manager who actually managed the delivery of the work rather than myself.
Thanks, Debbie. So, Chair, I would refer back to you to take any questions, if there are any, to direct to either myself or to Debbie. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Lucas Gill.
Thank you, Chair. With the effects of COVID and changes in market values, do the auditors see any possibility of the asset development programme being badly affected?
We didn't specifically look at that aspect, I don't think, when we looked at the value for money, because the value for money assessment is looking very much at the council's arrangements up to the 31st of March 2020. Obviously, the council could not foresee COVID-19, therefore we weren't really assessing how the council might respond to that in terms of its asset development programme. I think it's a good question in the sense that clearly it could, because there is such a lot of uncertainty in relation to assets at the moment, and part of the asset strategy is dependent on, I think, disposal of some of the council's assets that are kind of not surplus to requirements at the moment. So clearly, if depending on the market and the type of those assets, the value that the council is able to obtain for the sale of those could be impacted by COVID-19. I would think that would be something we'd be looking at in our value for money conclusion for 2021 in terms of how you revisited the asset management strategy to take account of that volatility and uncertainty in the markets. But I think what we're seeing is different types of property are being differently affected by COVID-19. So it very much depends on the sort of makeup of the sort of assets that the council have got and the plans they've got for them and how they are impacted. But it's certainly an area that I think the council will be looking at in 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sperring. You're muted, Councillor Sperring. Councillor Sperring, you're muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Chairman?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, Chairman, but it's an observation. Having been on the Audit Committee, along with some of my colleagues here for a number of years, it's very encouraging after, should we say, in the past, some areas of concern we've raised for the comments that Debbie has raised or mentioned this time. And I think it's a compliment to our own financial team for the strides they've made over the last couple of years, and the comments made this evening are very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sperring. Yes, I totally agree with that. Any further questions? No further questions?
Yeah, I have, Chair.
Oh,
Sorry.
Councillor Shaw?
Yes, I would say echo what has been said. I think we've had a very challenging year, and I think we're going to have, and it's going to go on to next year. So it's a credit to the audit team and our officers for getting a good report out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Doesn't appear to be any further people wanting to ask questions. No, so we can go then at paragraph 8.1 on page 6.3. There are 4 recommendations. Recommendation 1 and 4 are for noting. Recommendation 1, that the contents of the draft audit results report be noted. And recommendation 4, that the movement in general fund balances be noted. Are recommendations 1 and 4 noted, members?
Noted, Chairman.
Noted.
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 Right, so I think that's agreed. So members, can we please vote on recommendations 2 and 3 together? Are we happy with that?
Agreed.
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 Agreed. Right. Number 2 is that the financial statements be approved in principle. And number 3, that final sign-off of the financial statements be delegated to the chairman of the audit committee, subject to no significant audit changes being identified post the committee meeting. I will assume you are in agreement unless you click on the raise hand icon. Yes? So voting will be done by a roll call of names. Please indicate if you wish to have a recorded vote and whether you are voting for or against the recommendation, or if you wish to abstain.
So councillors, you're voting for recommendations 2 and 3. Councillor Mrs. Butcher.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Carter.
Thank you. No, and 4.
Councillor Lucas Gill. Councillor Lucas Gill.
Sorry, the screen's playing up. The vote is for.
Thank you. Councillor Merrick.
No recorded vote and 4.
Councillor Milne.
No recorded vote and 4.
Councillor Newport.
No and 4.
Councillor Mrs Shaw.
No and 4.
Councillor Mr Shaw.
No and 4.
Councillor Sperring.
No and 4.
Councillor Wilson.
No and 4.
Chairman, that's unanimous.
So that's the motion has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Well, short and sweet, that then concludes the meeting. Thank you for attending. I'm closing the meeting at 19:56 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody, and good evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, thank you,
Right.
Chairman.